regime. And I think you're laughing. I'm obviously being a little bit facetious. But the truth is that something historic did happen in the US in 2008. It was the first time in our country's 220-year history of white male presidents that an African-American man was elected to the highest office in the nation. Obama's election broke a streak that spanned 43 administrations. This was extremely profound, especially for the approximately 41 million African Americans in this country. For 4 centuries, we've suffered enslavement, Jim Crow segregation, lynch mob terror, and racist discrimination manifested in countless ways. The fact is that racism against African Americans and other oppressed nationalities has in reality been far more integral to the American way than anything truly resembling democracy. In a way, Obama's victory showed how much progress the Black liberation struggle and its legacy has made in eroding white supremacy in this nation. So do you remember that day on January 20th, 2009, when Obama took office and 2 to 3 million people filled the mall in Washington, D.C.? People were crying and cheering and singing and waving goodbye to Bush's helicopter. It was euphoria all over the country. And understandably so, people were relieved. They believed that since the Bush years were over, real change was now going to come. And if you think about it, really at that point, Obama could have done anything. If Obama had immediately called on his supporters, called on those 2 to 3 million people on the mall and the countless others across the country who supported him, and maybe told them to march for jobs, to march for health care, a real single-payer health care program for everyone in this nation, they would have turned out in droves. There's no telling what could have happened and what could have been accomplished. So why didn't he do it? The answer is that because the office of president comes with a job description, a very specific job description. And that job description is CEO of the capitalist ruling class, charged with protecting and expanding their interests. The president is put in office specifically to protect a system of extreme and growing poverty among the working class and extreme wealth for the capitalists, who accumulate their fortune from the labor of the working people. The capitalist state perpetuates racism, police repression, mass incarceration, and endless war. We are taught, and many people believe, that the presidential election is the process of selecting the next leader of the country, and that the country includes all of us. But in reality, our democracy is a democracy of, by, and for the rich. You get as much democracy as you can buy. In any election, if you look through the top 100 contributors to either candidate, you can see that with the exception of a handful of labor unions, the chief campaign contributors also make up the lion's share of the top 100 of the Fortune 500. This election cycle is no different. As of June this year, candidates for the 2 major capitalist parties had raised more than $100 million in combined campaign funds. The Obama campaign and the Democratic Party are responsible for a record-breaking $86 million, while Republican frontrunner Mitt Romney has raised over $18 million. Though they're wealthy individually, there's simply no way that any candidate could raise those kind of funds without the support of some sector of the ruling class. Campaign costs for either side are expected to exceed $1 million in 2012. So why even have an election? Certainly the capitalist class views the elections as important, you can see by that massive investment, but the question is why? Well, thinking back to 2008, can you imagine what would have happened if McCain, who's seen as an extension of the hated Bush regime, had won that election? Imagine if McCain alone had presided over the bailout, the largest transfer of wealth in human history, delivering trillions of tax dollars to his friends on Wall Street. Imagine if McCain had announced that the recession is over while millions of people were losing their home and the unemployment rates were soaring. Imagine if it were McCain in the depths of the economic crisis extending his tax cuts to the very wealthy. What if he had made nearly $1 trillion in cuts to education, housing, healthcare, transportation, environmental protection, and an assortment of social programs and services that are already stretched thin? What if the Republicans had declared a pay freeze for federal workers and allowed state governments to aggressively try to destroy and outlaw public sector unions, targeting teachers, office workers, firefighters, and others? What if McCain had deported 1 million undocumented immigrants, more than Bush had in the previous 8 years combined? If he had tripled the number of troops deployed to Afghanistan, bombed Pakistan, and launched a new imperialist war of aggression in Libya, assassinating Libya's leader and destroying its infrastructure? How would the anti-war movement have responded? How would the labor unions respond? How would oppressed African American communities, who at this point are experiencing an uptick in both unemployment and police violence, have responded? And what about the million-strong immigrant rights movement? How would they have responded? The answer is, as we can imagine, there would have been mass mobilizations of a scope and militancy that would have put even the oppressive Occupy movement to shame. It would have been immediately, painfully obvious to all the affected sectors of society that they must fight to defend their interests. We know this, and so does the ruling class. That's why, in the last election cycle, 71% of campaign contributions from the big banks and other finance capitalists went to Obama. These interests, who sit at the very top of the pyramid of capitalist society, have traditionally tended to direct most of their contributions to the Republicans. The Democrats and Republicans are both capitalist parties, but they're not identical. The Democrats are perceived as friends of the working class, though the last 4 years has proven that illusion to be painfully thin. But still, in 2008, when the capitalist economic crisis was just beginning to unfold, the ruling class correctly calculated that a popular Democrat, an African American, would serve as a better interest for quelling rebellion from the masses. A better instrument, yeah, for quelling rebellion from the masses. They knew that in these times, labor unions and African Americans, the very same groups who would be leading the struggle where these attacks carried out by Republicans, would be stymied by loyalty to this president. They were correct. The election of Barack Obama and the circus of the campaign cycle did help stave off protests of the people who were suffering the most, at least for a little while. Democracy in capitalist society is the preferred form of class rule precisely because it conceals the nature of this rule. It allows them to periodically change their image, give the appearance of choice, while carrying out the same program of class warfare. It keeps the exploited sectors of society from drawing the revolutionary conclusions needed to overthrow it. Instead of fighting the system, many oppressed people throw their weight behind the Democrats, who are inaccurately perceived to be the party of the people. When the Democrats do nothing to affect the status quo, many get disillusioned and shift to the Republicans or drop out of voting and politics altogether. This happened in 2010 during the midterm elections, when the weight of the ruling class shifted back to the Republicans, who made huge gains in Congress. It was the most expensive midterm election in history, costing over $4 billion. They were helped along by a Supreme Court decision earlier this year, the Citizens United case, in which the court ruled that the banks and corporations had the same free speech rights as people. During that election, many of the people of color and poor and working people who had turned out in huge numbers to elect President Obama, just set out that election entirely. In fact, that's the real value from the point of view of the capitalist ruling class of having a two-party, but no more than two-party system. It conveys the illusion of democracy and choice, while serving to protect at all times the interests of those who hold the real power. And every 2 or 4 years, the cycle can repeat itself again. So basically, what I'm saying is the capitalist electoral system is a sham. It's a system rigged to ensure the domination of a tiny ruling class of Wall Street bankers, corporations, and big business owners over the vast majority of people in the United States, the working class. Virtually every election is a case of the working class going into the voting booth and voting for who will serve as our oppressor for the next 2 to 4 years. We as socialists call them bourgeois or capitalist elections, not as an insulting or pejorative term, but as an objective reality. No matter if it's the Democrats or the Republicans who get the most votes, the capitalists will win. So if that's the case, what's the role of socialists in the election? Why do we even participate? Well, it's because we believe in utilizing any and every means of struggle. Millions of people in this country will vote, and those who do not directly participate are forced to listen closely, because the corporate media focuses almost exclusively on the elections constantly in that cycle. We as a party believe, as Lenin did, that with very few exceptions, any revolutionary party should utilize any and every opportunity to reach the working class. So we participate where we can. We ran candidates in 2008 and again in 2010, not because we held any illusions about the electoral system, but because it's a way to reach out to the working class with our program, a program for real revolutionary change. Our campaigns seek to provide a true alternative for workers. In our organizing, every day we are involved in the struggles, both large and small, that affect our class. The struggle for jobs, for housing, for healthcare and education. We always fight for an end to the wars, for an end to racism and bigotry, and for equal rights to all. We want to speak to the tens of millions of working class and oppressed people who desire real change, but will not get it through the capitalist electoral process. We want to use the election to fight against the system and spread the ideas of revolution, of true change. Though we know that the only arena which offers workers a real opportunity to make change is in the streets. Thank you.